So you want to build a slot 1 retro gaming PC. Good on you. It is one of the best platforms, very popular and sought after in the community because it is so flexible. With ISA, PCI and HEP you can do so many different projects, be it DOS or Windows. However, setting one up can be a little bit tricky. So in this video I walk you through my process. We will talk about the parts. There are links down below with all the downloads, the resources, the drivers and so on. So yeah, let's start. The components for this video: we have a Gigabyte slot 1 mainboard flashed with the latest BIOS. We've got a Pentium II, 350 MHz, 128 GB of SD-RAM. For the graphics, the famous S3 Verge 3D decelerator with 2 MB of video RAM. And for sound today, the Sound Blaster Creative Labs ODG, which has some DOS compatibility. And for storage, we're using a SD to ID adapter with a 32 GB SD card. So I just turned on the machine and this motherboard supports auto configuration. It's asking if our CPU has a 66 or a 100 MHz frontside bus. It's a Pentium II running at 350, so this one has 100 MHz FSB. Now the BIOS, there are lots of options. If you just want to quickly get started, look for something setup defaults or turbo defaults. So we're just gonna press F5, load defaults, but I will go over each page and I will point out some quite interesting BIOS settings. Under main, we can see our storage options. I've already connected the SD to ID adapter to the primary master. It shows up here with a capacity of 32 GB. Now, if you don't have anything else connected, you can actually go into here and set it to none. This will mean that the motherboard will not try to auto detect all the drives when you turning on the machine. Just make it boot a little bit faster. We do have the Gotek floppy emulator, but apart from that, we don't have to change anything on this page. Under advanced, I'm not going to do any overclocking. Interesting is the cache option. If you want to slow down the CPU to play some old XT or 286 era DOS games, then this is what you can do here. Important is the USB legacy support. Auto should work fine, but make sure it's not set to disabled because we're using USB keyboard and mouse. If this is set to disabled, you will not have input device under DOS. Chip configuration by SPD, that means it probes the memory module and it will select the most suitable timings. I/O devices, I like to disable some resources, so I'm turning off the serial ports, the COM ports, as well as the parallel port. That frees up some interrupts, some resources for, especially for DOS sound cards, quite important. PCI configuration, nothing here we need to change. And shadow configuration, I like to turn this off. I don't see a huge benefit on a slot 1 machine. Under power, there is something interesting here under hardware monitor. You can see the -5 voltage has read -6.19. That's because modern power supplies don't have -5 volts. If you're using an old ancient power supply that's older than 10 years, I would turn off the machine, buy a new one. And what you can do to avoid the machine triggering an error, we can toggle it to ignore, and now at post it will not throw an error and stop the boot process. Boot order is next. We're booting from the legacy floppy drive first, then from our main storage device, and then you can also configure the other options. If you want to toggle the order, just press plus or minus to just set the order of the boot device. And then under exit, we can do exit saving changes and we're good to go. So I'm pressing yes, the BIOS settings have been saved. The next goal is to partition and format the hard drive, our storage device, and make it bootable. So you will need either to boot from the floppy drive or from the optical drive. In our case, from the floppy drive, which is a Gotek floppy emulator. And that shouldn't take too long. I've just inserted the floppy disk. Here we go. Start computer without the CD-ROM support. I will make the floppy image available on my website, and then you have various options. You basically need to write that floppy image either onto a floppy disk or onto a CD-ROM to boot from there. These are old machines that don't have USB boot capability, so you need to have a floppy drive or an optical drive. There's really no way around it. So here all it's saying is that our drive isn't partitioned yet, which is fine. I wiped it. It's a factory new SD card, and I plugged it into a modern computer with a USB to SD card reader. We want large disk support. If you say no to this, it will create FAT16 with 2 GB per partition. We want to have a single FAT32 with 32 GB. So we say yes to this question. This is fdisk, our partition software. Let's have a look. Display partition information, there's nothing there. So we go back out. Option number 1, create a DOS partition. Create a primary DOS partition. It's now checking the drive integrity. This might take a longer time if you have a larger storage device under Windows 98. If you have drives that are too large, it can cause some issues. I recommend 32 gig or 64 GB. We want to use all the space, absolutely. So we confirm it with a yes. It's running another verification of the drive integrity. And remember, for storage, there are lots of options. I've done videos in the past. Press escape to exit fdisk, and we need to do a reboot. The next step will be formatting our storage and making it bootable. We will then confirm that it boots, and then we'll shut down the machine, put the storage device with the USB SD adapter into a modern machine, and then we can copy Windows drivers and some games. Just coming back to storage devices, I've done videos in the past what you can use. You can buy an ID hard drive. They're a little bit fragile. Most of mine have stopped working, so I switched to flash-based devices. If you have the StarTech SATA to ID adapter, that one is good. The other ones that are cheap on eBay, hit and miss. On this machine, the one I have wouldn't work, so I switched to the SD card adapter. And for slot 1 machine, these adapters, I think they max out at 20 or 25 megabytes a second. That's perfectly fine. It fits nice into the UDMA33 standard of these computers. Okay, so now we will format the C drive with the /s parameter, which will copy the boot files onto our SD card to make it bootable. If you have a mechanical hard drive, this will take really long, and also the larger your storage device, the longer it takes. So with a 32 GB device, it doesn't take too long. There you go, we are almost done. It's just finishing off the formatting task, and then it will copy over the system files. We can give it a label. Let's call it slot 1 fun, because that's what this is all about. Here we go. Now, if it's a factory new flash storage device, very important, you need to run the fdisk/mbr command, which will recreate the partition table or something like that. Without this command, the machine will not boot. Okay, we are now pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete to reboot the machine, and I'm just ejecting the floppy, the USB thumb drive from the Gotek, so that the machine will not boot from the floppy, but hopefully it will boot from the storage device. There you go. That's all we need. And now I'm shutting down the machine, and I'm going to copy the Windows setup files, drivers, games, some benchmarks onto the SD card, and we will be back very shortly. Okay, we are back. I've copied all the files onto our storage device. We will install Windows 98 first. Now there are some hidden options to speed up the process. So I'm going to go setup/is, which means do not run ScanDisk. This will skip checking the hard drive. I know everything works and it will just speed up the process. Now I'm using an automated answer file. I've done a video in the past. In fact, I've done many videos in the past that I will be referring to in this video. The subject matter is just very not complex, but there's just a lot to talk about. So an automatic answer file fills in the country, the username, the license key, what software you want, and so on. The only user input you need to do is after the first reboot, acknowledging the license agreement, confirming the license key, and so on. Everything else happens automatically. So I'll just let that run, and we'll be back whenever there's interaction necessary. First part of the installation is complete. It is now going to restart, and we can just press enter to go ahead. Here we go. All this information is pre-populated from the automatic answer file. Just click next and then accept the license agreement. Here's the license key. You get that from the WinWorld website as well as the ISO, and click finish. And now it's gonna identify all the hardware, and we will be back on the desktop when everything is finished. Okay, and we are booting the first time into Windows. It's picking up the ViewSonic monitor. Just go next, search for best driver, untick this one, and it will install some default plug and play monitor driver. We will do some housekeeping now, and yeah, if you forgot to copy some driver onto the machine, yeah, not a big deal. Shut it down, eject the SD card, back to the main desktop. Or option B, this machine has USB. You can use the USB storage driver and then use a FAT32 formatted USB thumb drive to copy data. I'm just going to do some housekeeping. I like getting rid of these icons. I don't need them. And then I like to auto arrange the desktop icons like that. And I also like to drag the Windows Explorer shortcut. Hold down Control and then drag it down here to the taskbar. Okay, and now we have to install some drivers. Now this is a fairly slow machine. It's a Pentium II, so installation takes a little bit more time. I like to, here we have the Windows 98 installation files. This is handy. You don't need the disk anymore. It will just find it from this folder. And PCL, this is where I put all the drivers as well as a bunch of games. Let's start with the Intel chipset drivers. You can get these on my website. 2002, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be any more modern. In fact, the older, sometimes the better, because with newer chipset drivers, they focus on the later chipsets and neglect the older ones. And in terms of process, chipset drivers first, then the graphics, then the audio. That's my process. So here we just go next, yes. If your main board has another chipset from Via, then you need the drivers from Via, but for slot 1, I urge you, get a board with the 440BX chipset. It's rock solid and super stable. Okay, one of many reboots. Now it's identifying all the components and installing the drivers. That doesn't take too long, but it might take a minute or two, so just be prepared. And we need another reboot. There we go, and one thing we need to do is activate the DMA mode for the storage. The Intel chipset drivers don't do that automatically. And we can also have a look at the devices. Sometimes there's a negative surprise here with the PS2 port. That has to do because we're using USB and the machine somehow gets confused. You can play around with deleting the devices and changing the BIOS settings to get rid of this warning, but it has no impact, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Go to disk drives, generic ID, disk type 47, settings, tick the DMA box, OK, close. This will boost storage performance. On the topic of storage performance, let's run the ATTO disk benchmark and I'll show you what performance we are getting with this system. Here we go, let's have a look at the results, and yeah, in green we can see the read performance. It maxes out at around 25 megabytes a second. That's because of the conversion chip on the SD to ID adapter. Right performance of this particular card is a little bit on the weak side. Pro tip, if you're in the market for a SD card, look for the A1 or A2 rating. That means the SD card is approved for storage in tablets, game consoles, and so on. And yeah, so I'm pretty happy. It's a no-name SD card. Next up are the graphics drivers, and you can get them from the Vogon's drivers website. You'll find there's no installer here. So these drivers you need to install through Device Manager. Here we have, where's the graphics card, display adapter, double click, driver, update driver, next, next, specify location, browse, and then we navigate to that folder. Here we go, okay, next. Now here it's saying the current drivers are actually more modern, but they don't work well, so choose this option, view list. These are the drivers we want from 1997, okay, next, next, finish, and we have to reboot the machine. We are back, and Windows 98 decided to activate the view as a web page, so just tick that to get rid of it. And now let's have a look in the display options. Let's set the resolution to 800 by 600. And then under advanced, under adapter, I like setting the refresh rate to 60 Hertz. And next, for a nice image, click start, shutdown. We have a bit of a grid pattern, and then we need to activate the monitor options. Go up here, auto image adjust, and it will now calibrate and adjust the position and the size, and we will get a nice sharp image. Okay, now the drivers for the sound card are next. We use Joseph's Audigy drivers here. I will put a link down below in the video description. We need to go to CT shared. I believe it's launch app sysinfo setup. That's the first step. Okay, and next we need the drivers. They are under audio and then drivers. We have an option between the VXD and the WDM drivers. There are pros and cons. VXD is better for 3D audio and for games. Also supports DOS drivers, which I want. Some games we're going to play today use DOS. However, you don't get CD audio tracks over the CD drive emulator. For that you want to use WDM, but then I believe you don't get the DOS drivers. So I'm going to choose this option. Ideally you have an optical disk drive with the analog audio connected to the CD-ROM, but I don't have access to all my equipment at the moment, so we're just going to use a virtual disk drive. So this process will take a while. I'll be back when this is finished. And you guessed it, another reboot. We are back. There's more to install, so we go back to our drivers, Joseph's Audigy drivers, AU1, and then we're going to audio. There are a couple of options you might want to install. I'm just going to go for the Audio HQ. Install that part. There you go. And very important are the DOS drivers. AU2, Audigy DOS driver, setup. Yes, next. And another reboot. It's installing the driver. Okay, let's have a look at the resources for our Sound Blaster. Device Manager, Sound Video Game Controllers, Sound Blaster 16 emulation resources. 220, 330 for the MIDI, 388 for AdLib. We've got DMA 1 and 5 and Interrupt 5, that's perfect. So now let's talk about DOS. So in the DOS prompt, you will already have the Sound Blaster drivers loaded. But what about MS-DOS mode? Well, let's shut down the machine. reboot into MS-DOS mode. Here we go. And then we can see here in the directory there's an AutoExec batch file, and Windows renames files in the background. So let's just have a look what it loads. You can see it's loading here the Sound Blaster audio driver. So what we're going to do, we're going to copy that batch file into another batch file. We're just going to call it Sound SND Blast batch file, and then we're going to type exit to go back into Windows. The reason we did this is because I want to use my MS-DOS mode super easy project, which consists of a driver's directory. Now it's hiding a few files, so we need to turn that on under folder options, view, and then show all files, hide extensions. There we can see the mouse and also the CD-ROM driver. And then under PCL, restart into MS-DOS mode. We're going to copy that onto our desktop like that. Restart in MS-DOS mode. Double click, the machine will reboot and load the MS-DOS mode super easy. Link down below in the video description. I'll try to put all the links in the description. You can find it on my website, because I want more of you out there to get into the hobby of retro PC gaming. So what this does, it gives you memory options, only conventional, extended or expanded. Certain DOS games have certain requirements, as well as do you want a mouse, do you want optical disk drive. So let's go for extended, expanded with mouse. Let's try this option. Okay, it actually worked. It found the mouse on the USB. Not every machine supports this, so yeah, we've got a working mouse. This is a Logitech keyboard mouse. Not sure what model. Nothing too fancy. And to get sound working, remember our batch file. Sound Blast batch file. Let's run it. It's now loading the Sound Blast, the DOS Sound Blaster driver, and you're good to go to try out some games. Sometimes when you type exit, it doesn't work. It doesn't reboot back into Windows. It is stuck in DOS. If that happens, all you have to do is delete autoexec.bat and config.sys to fix that issue. We have more to do. Let's tweak some audio settings. Go to settings, control panel, and then under multimedia, advanced properties, move the slider to best for a nice sample rate conversion quality. And then also I like to tune the mixer. Open the mixer by double clicking, properties, turn on all these hidden devices, and then I'm just gonna set the volume for play and wave, and then I like to mute all the inputs so we get a nice clean signal. There you go. And next we need DirectX. I like going with version 7. Also available on my website. I'll try to put a link down below in the video description. It needs another reboot. We're almost there. Next is our virtual disk drive. Daemon tools. Before we can run this, we need this software here. I think it updates the Windows installer setup. Yeah, it's required. Also on my website, and now we will install Daemon tools. This is a virtual disk drive. Makes it really easy if you've got a bunch of disk images to play your games. Now the games we will check out, I own them all, multiple copies in fact, retail as well as on GOG or Steam, but when working with the computer. Okay, another reboot. There you go. And now I'm just gonna tweak the desktop resolution also to 640 by 480 because all the games that we will test run at that resolution. calibrate the monitor. There you go. And now let's install some games. Right click on Demo Tools, Mount Image, and I put them on C, PCL, Games. Let's start with Tomb Raider, mount the image. This will actually use DOS, install Tomb Raider, auto detect, continue, save settings. There you go, that's installed. And because we have the S3 Verge, what's happening now? Oh, I think it's actually launching the game, yeah. So we can already play it. Yeah, let's have a look at the software render version first, and then we'll install the S3 Verge patch for some beautiful decelerated graphics. I believe pressing F1 will switch to 640 by 480. There you go. So yeah, the Pentium II does a fairly good job, but you can see there's some perspective warping going on. You can kind of see it here on the edge. So yeah, let's activate S3 Verge power. We need to quit the game. Close this off. Go to, I put it under games, Tomb Raider. Here's the patch. Control C, copy, go into, where is it? Tomb Raider, paste it here. And instead of launching Tomb, we're gonna launch Tomb S3. And fingers crossed, everything works. The DOS games, they are hard-coded with the S3D API, but some of the Windows games, they will not work with the default Windows 98 S3 driver. So go to detail settings, perspective correction, bilinear filtering on, 640x480 for the highest quality settings. Let's launch the game. There you go. I think F1, is it F2 for the frame counter? F2, yeah, look at that, 9 FPS. The graphics do look nicer. It is filtered, not as blocky, and we're getting the perspective correction, so the warping is gone. But yeah, the frame rate is very bad. So I'm actually working on a video about the S3 Verge. It gets trashed in most YouTube videos. What I want to do is, of course I will talk about the performance, but I want to put it into context of how things were in 1996 and referencing PC magazines at the time, looking at how the story about the S3 Verge evolved. Okay, so that's running. Let's check out another game. Let's install Pod, and version 2.0 of Pod has a executable on the disk for the S3D version. English, install, okay, off we go. Okay, it wants to restart the computer. Let's do that. Okay, it actually launched the game straight after the reboot. We will get out of this game because we want to play the S3D accelerated version. Open the Explorer, go to the disk, and you'll see different executables, for example 3dfx, MMX. The one we want is this one here, S3D. Here we are, options, graphics. We will play, 640 by 480. I think this is interlaced letterbox. No, don't want that. Okay, let's leave everything like that. Okay, one player, single race. Okay, and go. Here we go. I hope this works with just the arrow keys. Yeah. It's running much better than Tomb Raider. As for the graphics, yeah, we can... I'm not sure if there's much texture filtering going on. It still looks quite a bit rough and raw. It seems that the user interface is high resolution. I'm not quite sure about the objects themselves, but at least the speed is acceptable. It's definitely not 9 FPS. I would say it's at least 30, and I would definitely call this playable. Okay, off to the next game. The next game is Croc, some sort of 3D platform game. Only the original version 1 has the S3D render support. Later versions switch to Direct 3D, which of course means you can use much faster video cards, play at higher resolution, get better frames, and so on. For installation, yep. Croc, Legend of the Gobos, whatever that means. It's a game I haven't played too much, but it is on various lists out there mentioning support for the S3D API, so of course I had to check it out. Okay, yes, we will play with keyboard. Okay, another reboot. Okay, double click on Croc, change driver settings, and you can see here all these video cards have native support. S3 Verge, 640-480, super lighting quality, filtered textures. Let's turn on all that eye candy. Okay, press key, start game, loading screen, start the game, and yeah, it seems to be working fine. As for the frame rate, well, it's not that great. Space jumping, and then you can hit them with the tail. Oops, he got me. You can hit them with the tail. I have to pick up those items here. Yeah, not quite sure what you actually have to do in this game. Jump and run games is not really my thing. And the frame rate really does. Okay, you can do like a power. Maybe you have to get onto this box. There you go. Well, the graphics are nice, but the frame rate is not. And already died. Look at that. So yeah, another game that's decelerated on the S3 Verge. But looks nice. If you're familiar with this game, got some tips, let me know. So guys, there you have it. There is really a lot to talk about when setting up a slot 1 machine, and that's because this platform is so flexible. You can go DOS, you can go Windows 98, or a bit of both, building a hybrid machine. And I will do my best to have all the resources, links down below in the video description, because yeah, there's a lot to it. The chipset drivers, the graphics drivers, the sound drivers, then you need to configure the MS-DOS mode, as well as having your Sound Blaster drivers configured for DOS. And we had a look at some games, a little sneak preview to the S3 Verge video. I will shoot that when I'm back home. I need my capture equipment, that card. Yeah, I don't want to film it off the LCD monitor. It doesn't do that video card justice. And yeah, now any comments, thoughts, suggestions down below. As always, I'm not telling you exactly how you should do things. This is just my recommended process that I've been doing for many years. And some of the parts, of course, there are better options out there. It's just what I have at the moment. And it just shows you don't necessarily have to have an ISA sound card for some awesome DOS gaming, a Sound Blaster Live or Audigy. A lot of games will work, not all of them, but many will work. And that's it. If you are still watching, thank you so much for the support. Check out my Patreon page. I'm now on Patreon with goodies like behind the scenes footage, extended gameplay, and yeah, sharing some more details about my life as well. And also access to a private Discord server so we can help you with your projects. And that's it for this one. Looking forward to hearing from you, and I shall see you soon with another one.